People are passionate about pizza. There's no doubt about it. It's one of the most hotly debated topics you can think of in the food world. People argue about minutia that it's really astounding to professional pizza makers sometimes about how much an ordinary citizen can think about pizza and debate pizza and travel to experience pizza from different areas. And we think it's that way because we think of pizza as being a collaborative food. And by collaborative, I mean that it's not when you go to a pizzeria, you share in the creation of that pizza. You commission the pizza maker to create what your vision of a perfect pizza is. So you go into a pizzeria and you're with your friends or your family, and you collaborate together to determine what that pizza is going to be, whether it's going to be thick crust or thin crust or well done or lightly cooked, or what items are going to go on that pizza. You learn something about the people that you're with. You learn about their likes and their dislikes and their preferences, and maybe something about what their background is based on what type of pizzas they order. And then you communicate that to your food server, or you communicate that to the pizzaiolo, and he tries to bring that vision of what your version of a perfect pizza is to reality. When a food is that personalized, people become very passionate about it. And there are ongoing debates about the origins of pizza and what a traditional pizza should be and what an authentic pizza should be. And I always like to explore that because the first thing that's always asked of me is, is pizza really Italian? Does pizza come from Italy? And especially in the 1960s, 1970s, when pizza started to be really popular in the United States and we really started to develop our own regional preferences, it morphed into something that a lot of people thought of as not being Italian, and then they started to call into question the pedigree of pizza. And the answer to that question is very complex. It's as complex as the history of Italy. We really have to, when we think about pizza and whether or not it is authentically Italian, we have to really think about all Italian food and all of the long and very varied history of the different regions of Italy. And I like to go back to the very beginnings and let people decide for themselves whether or not pizza is in fact of Italian origin. We can pretty much agree that all pizza starts with pizza dough, with the bread, okay, which is essentially a type of flatbread baked on a hearth. And traditional pizza was always baked right on the stones of the oven. And the bread baking traditions of Italy are always hearth-baked pizzas that are baked in the old days in a wood-burning oven. In the modern era, they use more gas, more electric ovens. But what's really the foundation of the pizza is the crust, is the dough of the pizza. The pizza dough actually, the traditions and origins of that pizza dough can date back to the ancient Egyptians. And the ancient Egyptians were the first civilization to cultivate wheat. They were the first civilization to control yeast, to control fermentation. So they had the first leavened breads. And they developed not only fermentation of breads, but also fermentation of beer, which was a very similar process. And that's really why pizza and beer go together so well. You can really think of beer as being a liquid form of pizza dough. So when we talk about pizza dough, we're really going back pre-Roman Empire, back almost 6,000 years, back to the Egyptian traditions of bread baking. The Greeks went to Egypt. Alexander the Great conquered the Egyptians. He learned those bread baking traditions, which gave him portable food to feed his armies. Eventually, the Greeks settled in southern Italy, and the area where we have most of our traditional pizza baking was actually an area that was originally part of Greater Greece. The area that we now call Napoli was originally called Neapolis, a Greek city. And that's where the original pizza makers can be traced back to, the original bakers of flatbread on the Italian peninsula. So we have a bread from Egypt that gets to southern Italy by way of the Greeks. And with the pizza margherita, we are always talking about tomato, mozzarella, basil, and a flatbread. The bread, of course, comes originally from Egypt. The tomato didn't get to Italy until the 15th century, late 15th century. Actually, probably closer to the mid-16th century, they actually started to consume tomatoes in Naples, brought back by the Spanish. And the Spanish were great explorers and great conquerors, and were at that time ruled the area around Naples. The Spanish explorers came back from Peru, from the area that's now called Peru, that is South America, with this plant that they thought of as an ornamental. They brought the tomato back to the Neapolitans, and we always say the Neapolitans were starving to death anyway, so they figured, why don't we try to eat this? They originally, most of Europe thought that the tomato was a poisonous plant. The Neapolitans experimented with cooking the tomato, and eventually that tomato made its way onto the flatbreads that they were already baking. Pizza Margherita also has mozzarella, and not just mozzarella, but mozzarella di bufala, which is the original mozzarella cheese. Mozzarella made from water buffalo milk. And the water buffalo is also not indigenous to Italy. The water buffalo was actually brought to Italy in the 12th century by crusaders returning from the Mideast. So the areas where they make mozzarella di bufala in Italy are Bari, Puglia, and Campania, the area where Naples is located. Those are the great mozzarella manufacturers of the Italian peninsula. It's not a coincidence because those were the drop-off points for crusaders returning back from the Mideast. They would make their way to the Italian peninsula and then go by land back into Europe. So we have a cheese that's made from water buffalo milk. We have a crust that was originally brought to the Italian peninsula by the Greeks, originated by the Egyptians. We top that with a tomato sauce that comes from Peru, and then we season it with basil, which actually comes from India. Which part of that is authentically Italian? You have to kind of decide for yourself. The Italian genius is to put all of those things together, to put them together in a new and unique way. And that's really the origins of our pizza, and the area where there is the most debate, because we always ask what should go on a pizza, what are the authentic traditional Italian toppings that go on a pizza. Actually, none of it is traditional in terms of origin, and all of it is traditional in terms of spirit, in terms of the passion of the pizza makers. And I have a very good friend in Chicago, Jonathan Goldsmith, who is a wonderful artisan, Neapolitan-style pizza maker. And he has a beautiful poem posted in his restaurant. And the gist of the poem is that dough, tomato, mozzarella, and basil put together makes the pizza margherita, but there's something missing. The heart of the pizzaiolo, the love of the pizzaiolo. And that's what truly makes a pizza. Not just the ingredients, not where the ingredients originate from, not whether something is traditional or not traditional, but is there love on that plate? And that's the difference between a pizza maker and what we call CPAs, certified pizza assemblers. A pizza maker is dedicated and proud of the craft of pizza making, of handcrafted pizza. And that's a completely different thing than taking a frozen dough ball out of a box and defrosting it and putting it through a stretcher and then running it on a conveyor belt.